Hey everybody, it's Chris Widener. Welcome to the Chris Widener Speaker Academy. First video right out of the chute. I've got not only one of my real good friends, been a friend a long time, but one of the top speakers in the world today, and certainly really over the last 10 years has been one of the dominant forces in the speaking industry. He is a former fighter pilot. He is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. An amazing guy, used to be involved in software sales, then got into the speaking business. He and I really, I think we actually met. We joined the National Speakers Association together, similar years, right in that, hit it right off, and just a great guy. We've vacationed together. We've been friends. We've certainly talked about the speaking business, but really one of the top speakers. He's built this business the traditional way with some untraditional twists. But when I talk about teaching people how to do the business, I always reference Waldo because he built it from the ground up using just basic nuts and bolts, blocking and tackling, and has built a seven-figure business each and every year. An amazing guy, Mr. Waldo Waldman. Waldo, thanks for being with us.
You got it, Chris. Great to be here. It's great to reconnect as well.
Yeah, good. So we are talking about positioning. And when I do my private coaching with people on the speaking business, it's literally the very first thing that I talk about. And it comes from this concept from the book Positioning by Jack Trout, Now Rise. And I just want to kick us off by reading the Business Dictionary definition of positioning, because I think it's interesting, and then you and I will have this discussion, and I know you've got a ton of stuff to say about this because nobody does positioning better than you do, Waldo. But here's the definition: an effort to influence consumer perception of a brand or product relative to the perception of competing brands or products. Its objective is to occupy a clear, unique, and advantageous position in the consumer's mind. That being said, there are, I heard the other day, a speaker bureau that has 20,000 speakers in their database. And so my question to you is how do we position ourselves for success? We've got people that are watching, they're beginner speakers. They're people maybe that haven't even started their speaking career. They want to get into it, beginning speakers. How in the world do they position themselves? Let's talk about that.
So you have to have a value proposition that is unique and viable and sticky, and most of all, relevant. Unique, viable in the consumer's mind, value-based and sticky and relevant to what's going on in the world today. And it has to authentically come from your background. So me as a fighter pilot, I went through combat, got an MBA, was in a couple of big sales jobs, technology and M&A, consulting, et cetera, commission only. So when I talk to salespeople, when I kind of create my value proposition, it has to come from a place of authenticity and experience. So my point is, as you're developing your brand and your value proposition and your positioning, if it's coming from a place of weakness, where you're a thought repeater, not a thought leader, where you're just spewing content from a book that you read and not from the experience and the scars and battle damage and trials and tribulations you've had, you will lose your positioning because there are too many competitors out there who are just going to eat your lunch. So when you're creating as a new speaker or even an evolving speaker, I've coached speakers who have 20 plus years in the business, Hall of Fame speakers like me, but they're no longer relevant. And when you start positioning yourself with something that's authentic, powerful to you based on your experiences, that's got to be the diamond. That's got to be the seed of the positioning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I've defined it is, and it happened to me, I hired a speaker coach in the mid-90s. I paid a guy $7,500 for a year to coach me on the speaker business.
Right.
And I don't even know if he's still around or not, but I ended up learning some really good things from the guy. And the first thing he said is you are no longer a motivational speaker. And I said, oh, why? And he said, because there's 10,000 motivational speakers. It creates no distinction for you. It creates no uniqueness for you. So I became a leadership speaker. Well, the problem with being a leadership speaker is now there's 1,000 leadership speakers.
You're broad, right.
Continuing to niche down, but again, it has to be unique for you. And this whole idea of positioning is being top of mind in a category, right? So I think you've got such an amazing brand, an amazing position. If somebody says, hey, let's have a military person there's how many people would you say are kicking around the speaker world total are the military people? It's a small world, maybe 20.
It's just no. There's a lot more than that, actually, a lot more, because they're coming into this niche. A lot of folks are leaving the military, PTSD, overcoming challenges, losing a limb, God forbid. But now they're leveraging that. So my space is being a lot more saturated with military speakers.
So you have to even more focus on positioning. So
yeah. So let me ask you, Chris. So positioning and branding are they're married to each other.
Very similar, right? Yeah.
Very similar. So how would you describe my positioning, my branding, like from somebody who knows me? What am I known as? What's like my shtick?
Well, so I think your brand is fighter pilot, right? You're the guy that comes on. You've got the flight suit, but I think your positioning is this leadership, teamwork. Because your book, Never Fly Solo, it's about being with other, teamwork, and then that whole idea of how the military taught you that teamwork aspect. So to me, that would be your position in the marketplace. Hey, we want a military guy. We want a high, I mean, I love your speech. Last time you were out here in Phoenix, I came and saw you down at the Phoenician. I love all the multimedia that goes on. So it's a very dynamic presentation. How would you describe your position?
So that's great. And, so I'm like, and my position in my branding, once again, are very coincident, so never fly solo, wingman. I'm the wingman in the industry. Yeah. And so it is about partnership. It's about collaboration, connection. So you hit it right on the head. When you talk about leadership or sales or customer service, that's at the top of the funnel, very wide. And what you have to do is kind of become more distinct, as Scott McCain would say. I think he's going to be one of your speakers, right?
Yeah, Scott's going to do some.
And be very segmented within and own a certain segment of your value proposition. For example, you speak on influence. Yep. That's one of your main topics. That's a segment of leadership.
And very few people who've even written books on influence. I think of Robert Cialdini, Kurt Mortensen, and I can never remember the guy's name. I talk about him all the time. I should go figure his name out. He wrote the best-selling book called Influencer. And then, I mean, there's just not a lot of guys that have distinguished themselves as talking about the idea of influence.
And so it takes a good market analysis and being relevant in the industry right now and the business world in particular. I want to talk to folks here who are speaking for business associations and on corporations, because a lot of the nonprofits or schools, et cetera, may not have your fee, although it's a great market as well. So my point is this, and I'm going to boil it down to this. You need to be a mint chocolate chip speaker in a vanilla chocolate world. You have to create a positioning and a brand that's coincident and unique that some people will absolutely love, or some people will absolutely say, no way, I don't like the flavor.
It has to be something that takes you top of mind, that people know it instantly, right?
But it's more than top of mind. It's more than top of mind. But to get to top of mind, you have to be able to solve the problem. The key is when they go to your website, when they go to your value proposition, what problem are you solving? What are the challenges that your constituents or your customers are having that you're the expert in solving? And your positioning comes from that. So if you're helping people overcome barriers, becoming more resilient, becoming more of an influencer within partnerships, within an organization that's in the high tech space, if you're talking about contingency planning in sales or cold calling or, there's so many.
There are guys that'll make an entire career off of talking to people about cold calling.
Yes,
and it's great. In fact, there was a speaker who made his entire career talking only to dentist and doctor's office employees. His entire career, 90% of all the speaking engagements he did was talking to dentist and doctor's office employees.
So he positioned and niched his market, not his brand. And sometimes you can be very effective by niching a particular market with your value proposition, with your experience, with your skill set. Or guys like me and some of the other folks like Larry Wingate, who's going to be on next, he positioned his brand to create an attraction to a broader market. And I always like to say niche your brand and positioning, not your market. Because if you're solely going after technology organizations or dentists or sales organizations, you may be limiting yourself. So I say go as broad as you can and be appealing to as much market as you can, but then have a distinct positioning that allows you to compete, which is part of the definition. How is your positioning different and unique in mint chocolate chip or mocha almond fudge or strawberry compared to the other flavors? So So you have to reflect as the new speakers who are potentially out there, or as an evolving speaker who's taken it to the next level, who may fall flat in this ever-changing market. Say, what's going on in the world today? We have disruption. We have consolidation of industry. We have a massive workforce issue. The war for talent is so prevalent. So as I'm evolving my brand, and this is important, Chris, for the speakers who are listening to this, I'm seeing what's out there in the marketplace, which is sticky and relevant, positioning myself in such a way that when a decision maker, the man or woman responsible for writing the check says, yes, that person can help me solve this problem. See, positioning and problems also have to be married. If you don't know that problem and how you're going to solve it, you will not be able to create a positioning and thus a brand that will compete. You'll be vanilla chocolate, or you'll try to be mint chocolate chip, and you'll fall flat because you won't have the chops, the acumen, the skill set, the throttle in the hand, the tactical acumen based on your experience to demonstrate competitive advantage and uniqueness from the platform, which, by the way, don't kid yourself, your positioning at the end of the day is made on the platform. You may BS your clients on your video and your positioning on your website, but if you're not relevant on stage, if your speech is not positioned in the right way and delivered with powerful anecdotes and solutions, you're going to get your butt shot down.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Maybe your position, wingman, never fly solo, 5 years ago would have been more, leadership focused or whatever, when leadership was really big. But right now, everything's about employee retention.
Right.
So now, never fly solo and wingman is about creating a culture where people feel like they're part of a team. And
yes, and they're loyal.
Right.
And they're loyal to the leaders. They're not quitting. So you're exactly right. So how do you? And sometimes it's just a marketing play. It's just positioning your vernacular, your words, and your solutions when you're speaking in such a way that you're able to shift it. You're putting a new veneer on some of that content, but the beef remains the same.
So I got a call the other day, a couple of weeks ago now, a chiropractor, and he's thinking about becoming a speaker. He's written a book. And I said, okay, so we started talking a little bit about positioning, and he says, well, I'm a chiropractor who's written a spiritual book. It's a very spiritual book. And I said, wow, a chiropractor who's written a spiritual book, you and 8,000 other chiropractors, what are you going to do to define yourself? Why should they pick you, the chiropractor who's written a spiritual book, over literally probably another 1,000 chiropractors who've written a spiritual book? Because, and I told him, I said, look, if somebody's looking for a speaker, a chiropractor who's written a spiritual book, John DeMartini is going to get that gig every single time, because he's the Tony Robbins of that particular category, right?
Right.
Learning how to define yourself. How do people go about finding their position? What is, for you, I think people could look at you and go say, Waldo, it's really easy for you. Air Force Academy graduate, fighter pilot, you throw on a jumpsuit, you use military jargon, and I'm not in any way poo-pooing that, because I know you truly are, I think, the hardest working speaker in America, and I know all of them. And you've worked hard to do it, but I think sometimes the cynical nature of some people say, well, I wasn't a fighter pilot. I sold insurance. What do I do? How do they find their position?
So, okay. Great question, because once again, there's other fighter pilots out there that are speaking, that are relevant, that are taking my clients away. So it's forcing me to evolve and reposition myself and shift myself a little bit. So I'm more of a warrior with a heart, right? I don't talk a lot of the tactics, although there is some. It's about how I overcame claustrophobia, dealt with adversity, fear of heights. I share a lot of the mishaps that I've had, the mess ups, my challenge. So my positioning in the industry as a decorated fighter pilot, all the awards, is really the heart, the passionate, empathetic, caring leader, the service-oriented, servant leadership type of focus. That's
so let me jump in. Let me jump in. So here's what meeting planners think. They think, oh, we want a military guy, but that one guy, all he does is it's just too much hype and too much machismo and too much. But I've seen your speech, and the way you just described it is perfectly true. They're like, yeah, but Waldo, he's the military guy, but he kind of has the heart aspect. So there's a delineation there between somebody who comes in and says, I'm a fighter pilot and I lit that guy up and da da da, you know, the machismo part as opposed to what you're talking about. I think that's a really good description of your particular position.
The warrior with a heart, to collaborative, connection, courage, and revealing some of my issues and scars and battle damage. So you see my branding, my vernacular is very coincident with that positioning. And so, you know, you brought something up really interesting before about going up against some of these higher level speakers, the ones who are getting the $20,000 to $40,000 keynotes. If you're a new speaker, maybe your positioning needs to be as the alternative. Maybe you want to go to the $2,500 to $7,500 market, where you're crafting your value proposition to the lower end market, building experience, level, flight time, right? Get video, and you'll eventually go there. You see, your positioning must be leveraged so that you're competing with people on your level. If you're trying to compete with the folks who are kicking butt, twice your fee range or twice your experience, that may not be a positioning play that you want to.
But let me ask you that. That brings up a really interesting point. Mark Sanborn's going to be talking about setting fees. But when I hired my coach, I was charging $1,500 a speech. This was 94 or something like that. And the first thing he said to me was, you're going to change your speaking fee. And I said, oh, is it too much? He said, no, it's way too low. And I said, oh, well, why? And he said, because people will think you're what we call a throwaway speaker. We've had all the really good speakers, but we've got a couple more spots. We got a little bit of budget left. Let's find some cheap speakers to do some workshops. And so talk to us a little bit about fees. I know Mark's going to do a full session on it, but how your fee helps determine your position.
Yeah.
In the mind of he's too cheap or he's too expensive, or how does that work? Do you think there's some credibility to that?
Oh, 100%, Chris. Many speakers need to lower their fee because they're going after a market, a segment that they can't play in, or they need to raise their fee based on their experience level, based on their background, the books they've written, the hours of flight time they've had in their profession. So yeah, you can undersell. I guarantee I've lost a lot of speeches because I was too inexpensive. I don't like to say cheap. I was too inexpensive. And so I wasn't able to create that value proposition. My positioning was too mediocre. I didn't.
Well, you know Steven Shapiro, right? Have you heard Steven's story about one of the first speeches he ever gave? They called him up from Europe and they said, we want to hire you, and you know, what do you charge? And he said $3,500. And they said, okay. And they came back and they said, was that 35,000 or 3,500? And he said, oh, 3,500. And they said, because the guys really want to hire you. And he said 3,500. And so they called him back like a week later and said, hey, you didn't get the gig. He goes, oh, I thought you said they wanted to hire me. And they said, yeah, but they thought you were 35,000. And he goes, well, why wouldn't they want me and save $32,000? He said, they actually paid a guy $35,000, but they figured if you only charge 3,500, you must not be that good.
Yeah, and exactly right. And that goes to your brand and your position. A lot of people are providing, you know, a great speech that are underselling themselves, and they're competing in a space that they don't need to be competing in. And so this takes time. This takes, you know, listening to the market, seeing what your peers are doing. You've got to be a fighter pilot in the industry, learning your competition, doing a market analysis, finding what other speakers are getting paid, what their experience level is. Look, if you're 25 years old, have a year of business experience, you're trying to go out and talk about leadership and business, you probably don't have the authority, credibility, or relevance to be able to command a higher fee.
But if you're 25 years old and you have 6 gold medals, you're going to start at 40 grand a speech.
Yep. That's how you command a fee and not demand a fee. That's why I said in the beginning, Chris, what is your experience? Yeah. What level of acumen do you have? What are the scars on your mind and in your hands, you know, the grit? What have you gone through? What's your experience level that's creating this relevant brand that is creating value in the mind of the competition? But you know, when you start going in, or value in the mind of the customer, but when you start going in to these higher fee clients and start commanding that fee, they're going to look at your positioning, your website, your brand. Are you starting with you on your website? Is it all about me, instead of saying, are you dealing with these challenges? What are the challenges that you're dealing with? I'm shutting off my phone here. What are the challenges that you're dealing with? What solutions can I provide you? Guide the prospect who's going to your website or talking to an agent, a bureau, or maybe watching a video, and then bring them down this path. And we've talked about this before. Lead with the solution. Lead with the problem and the solution. And don't just talk about how you solve those problems. Make sure that you're relevant to the prospect who's going to your website, watching a video, and making sure that you lead with that front and center. That is positioning. Problems that you solve, and then doing it in a distinct way, as a fire department, as a chiropractor, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that you guide them down this path.
When I describe positioning to people, you will be known for something. And I always use plumbers as an example. If a poor person's toilet breaks, they go to Google and they type in inexpensive plumbers or cheap plumbers. If a rich person's toilet breaks, they don't type cheap plumbers. They type best plumbers.
Right.
And if in the middle of the night you notice you're walking out to the kitchen to get some food, it's 2 a.m. and the roof is pouring water because a pipe is broken and there's water pouring into your kitchen from the roof, and the roof is, you don't call best plumber, you don't call inexpensive plumber, you Google the term emergency plumber.
Right.
And you'll probably find that each of those terms pulls up different plumbers.
Right.
I think that that's really important for people and speakers to understand that that you need to pick one of those lanes and dominate that particular category.
But then your positioning will evolve as you evolve.
Sure.
As you gain more experience dealing with a lot of fixing a lot of toilets or fixing a lot of sinks, you'll gain the experience, the acumen, the skill set, and the relevance, and the referral sources, so that you can create this compelling, more value-based positioning and branding. So if you're out there just starting out, you don't need to pigeonhole yourself in this one area. Your job is to solve problems, create a solution, go out there, call, refer, speak for free if you need to, create this value proposition, record it, listen to your clients, ask the audience members how you're relevant for them, what is the biggest takeaways, and then refine your brand and refine your positioning, because sometimes you may not know how you're positioned the best way. Your clients will. People who know you will. Your speaker peers will. And they will create new insights and paradigms for you and help you evolve and track accordingly and tweak that value proposition. And as you gain airtime, experience on the platform, and all the incumbent missiles that will come at you as you try to grow in this crazy competitive business.
Yeah.
But it starts with your experience and really grows from there.
Well, folks, you really have just spent 20, 30 minutes with one of the best in the business. And I sincerely mean that. He's been a close friend of mine and a person that I've admired in the business, who's built a 7-figure business, best-selling books, just an amazing guy, an amazing family guy. His little boy is Ace. I love the name Ace because it's a great pilot name. His wife Dana, amazing people. So appreciate you. Waldo, how can people get a hold of you, and what might they be able to go a little bit deeper with you on?
Right, I'm all over the social media at Waldo Waldman. If you Google Waldo Waldman or you go at Waldo Waldman, I'm all over the place there. My phone's blowing up. And my website is yourwingman.com, yourwingman.com. People can find me there. There's a ton of resources there. And also I do speaker coaching as well on the branding and marketing and sales side. How do you take your experience? You got great platform skills, amazing storyteller, great value proposition, but how do you create a value-based sticky brand and value proposition so you can raise your fees and create more of a compelling high fee brand in the marketplace. So that's what I do. And that's topgunspeaker.com, topgunspeaker.com. You can see how all my branding is very coincident with each other, Your Wingman, Top Gun, et cetera. So that's what I do. And that's what I love doing. And I also know who to call when I need a little bit of marketing help as well. And that's you, Chris. You're extremely great at what you do. You build relationships, you provide value. And I always learn from you and consider you one of my Top Gun wingmen who I depend on as well. So
cool. Thanks, man. All right, folks, that was Waldo Waldman. Appreciate you joining us, and I hope that you learned lots of great things because there was a lot of great information there.